3:01, so the meeting is now going to start. Good afternoon. Welcome to DCA's Delta Stakeholder Engagement Committee meeting. It's being held via teleconference on Ring Central. This is Wednesday, April 28th, 2021. I am Chair Sarah Palmer, and thank you for joining us. We appreciate your taking time to participate in this process and providing your thoughts on ways we can provide a community focus on the engineering aspects of a proposed conveyance project. So could you please start the roll call?
Of course. Hello, everyone. Chair Palmer.
Here.
Vice Chair Keegan.
Here.
Committee Member Swenson. I saw her.
Here.
Thanks. Committee Member Whaley. Committee Member Berrigan-Perea. I see you too. Committee Member Giacomo.
Here, sorry.
Okay. Committee Member Glosky. Committee Member Welch. Committee Member Shia. Committee Member Marino. Committee Member Cosio.
Here.
Committee Member Gonzalez-Potter.
Here.
Chairman Tarango, apologies.
Present.
Committee Member Mann. Committee Member Liebig. Committee Member Lytle. Committee Member Moran.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Teaba.
Here.
Committee Member Merlo. Committee Member Hardesty.
Here.
Okay, and I'm going to go back through the folks that I missed. Committee Member Whaley. If you see her on the line, just let me know. Committee Member Giacomo. Committee Member Glosky. Committee Member Welch. Committee Member Shia. Committee Member Marino. Committee Member Cox.
Here.
Committee Member Mann. Committee Member Liebig. Committee Member Lytle. And Committee Member Merlo. So let me see, that's
Jasmine, I see CC Giacomo on the attendees list.
great.
Yeah, we heard from CC.
Let me
Yeah, her
just,
hand is up.
okay, let me just look through to see if I see any of these others, if you guys noticed. Because I'm not sure if that is.
Committee Member Marino will be joining us in just a few minutes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think Steve Harai is on the attendees as well.
What was that? Who?
Is it Steve Harai? He's also one of our members, isn't he?
No,
No, okay, sorry. Okay.
it's okay. I believe that is a quorum. I'm trying to count the members that we have listed here.
Karen has her hand up as well.
Karen, awesome. Yes, and then it is a quorum. All right, we are ready to go.
Okay. Great. Then let me start with our introductory remarks. The meeting is being conducted via Ring Central and teleconference to ensure we are adhering to requirements related to the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. The purpose of the SEC is to create a forum for Delta stakeholders to provide input and feedback on technical and engineering issues relating to the DCA's current activities. The SEC is a formal advisory body to the DCA Board of Directors. It is subject to the public transparency laws applicable to local public agencies like the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. It's important to note that participation in this Stakeholders Engagement Committee does not in any way indicate support by its members of any Delta conveyance system. Okay. So practices for the virtual meeting, the SEC discussion process and public comment periods will remain consistent with past meetings. The SEC comments and questions during the discussion portions of our meeting SEC members will use the raise hand function within Ring Central, and Ms. Martinez will call the name of the SEC member to make a comment or ask a question. As in past meetings, SEC members will have complete control of their video and audio at all times. We request that you keep your video on to make for a better meeting, although understandably sometimes you have to turn it off if your bandwidth is starting to get a little narrow. We also ask that everyone mute themselves when you're not talking to eliminate unintended background noise or participation by our dogs. Public comment. Given this Ring platform, attendees will be muted and not have a video option unless they are speaking during public comment. At that point, we will unmute you, and it will be up to speakers whether or not you activate your video. So that will be your choice. If you wish to provide public comment on agenda items, please complete the online public comment form by 4 p.m. The link can be found at the DCA.org website on the SEC agenda. Once we get to the end of each agendized item in the meeting, our facilitator, Valerie Martinez, will call out to each person to speak. The line will be opened and the speaker will provide comments. We will follow the same process for public comment on non-agendized items. The public may also provide written public comment by email to publiccomment@dcdca.org. All written comments received prior to the conclusion of the meeting will be included in the written record for the meeting, but will not be read during the meeting. Also, public comments, generally speaking, we limit them to about 3 minutes. And I think Valerie or Claudia, somebody puts up a 3-minute timing so you can keep track of that. So after that, let's see where else we're going on this one. I will try to keep all my little papers on this thing. There we go. Okay. So in terms of minutes review, let's look at the minutes review. And does anyone have any changes or comments about the minutes? These are the minutes of February 24th, 2021, our regular meeting. And note that you have until Friday to make adjustments by sending those to Jasmine Runquist. Does anyone have any changes or questions or comments?
I will note that committee member Shia has provided a couple of corrections. They are not yet reflected, obviously, in the minutes, but they have been received.
Okay, good. And they will be included in the final posted minutes, correct? Okay, good. Thank you, committee member Shia. Next, we're going to go to the DCA SEC updates. And in that one, we're going to commence item 4A. And I want to recognize a guest, Carla Nemeth, Director of the California Department of Water Resources. So please introduce her.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you, as it were. I hope you'll just indulge me for a few moments here. I know you have a very packed agenda, and I wanted an opportunity to come and acknowledge all the hard work that's been underway. I know that your participation in this committee has been intensive and very time-consuming, and I do want you to know that the input that we have received has been very, very valuable. I also just want to be very candid to say that I'm not under any illusion that you all will feel differently about this project overall. But I do believe that the information that you're providing, the feedback you're providing, will help us find ways through design and engineering about how we can avoid altogether or really minimize impacts to your local communities that you're representing here. You know, one of the things that I'm hoping that you all will continue to engage in that very same spirit, again, without any insistence that that you need to agree with the project in any way. I really do believe that people of good conscience can have very intense disagreements, but find a way to work together. And one of the ways in which we are hoping to deepen our work with you all is on the community benefits program. So I hope that you will continue to stick with this. And I wanted to just tell you personally how important this input has been to the Department of Water Resources. I know she's not here today, but you all may know that Catherine Mallon has moved on to other opportunities. I'm excited to introduce Graham and welcome him into our process. He has agreed to take the helm in an interim way for the Design and Construction Authority, knowing that there's a lot of work that DWR needs to do relative to permitting and other things for this project. I really enjoyed having Catherine on this project. For me, she brought a fresh sensibility to the department, and she was really headstrong in her insistence on just really being candid with you all and what the true nature of this project's impacts were to your community.
Tap you on the shoulder and go like this.
Really her real sense of the tremendous impact and the reality of this kind of a project, affecting your backyards and front yards for benefits that, largely accrue to other parts of the state. And Catherine was insistent and a real force of nature. And she's part of the reason why I think DWR has gotten the valuable feedback that it has thus far. So again, she's not able to be with us today, but I did want to acknowledge her publicly, and I wanted to welcome Graham, and then finally just thank you again for the intensive time commitment and effort, and hope that you will continue in that same spirit. So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Director.
you, Carla. We seriously appreciate your thoughts on this. Okay, great. All right. So thank you for that input, and I hope that we all take this to heart in terms of like what Catherine's contributions were, and definitely what the SEC members' contributions are, and hopefully continue to be. Okay, so Barbara Keegan was going to give a few thoughts here. Barbara?
Well, thank you very much. Carla is a hard act to follow, but I'll do my very best. I went back and looked at our agenda for our very first meeting, and that was November 13th, 2019. And that's amazing to me that it was only 16 months ago, because I feel like we've done like at least 3 years worth of work. It's really been incredible. And I want to take a moment just to, first off, thank everyone. The general purpose of our meeting was the technical and engineering feedback, that this would provide a forum for Delta stakeholders to really communicate with the technical and engineering team relative to the issues associated with the DCA's activities. And also discussing measures to offset effects. And that's something that I think that we've had an incredible amount of input from this group, and it's been extremely valuable. And then the work that all of you do in terms of connecting to the community groups that you represent, your neighbors, your respective groups, and bringing that information back to the Stakeholder Engagement Committee. So now we're moving into a new phase. We've gone through sort of the formal process in terms of evaluating the various kind of technical issues, the siting, what goes where, why things have to happen in a certain kind of way. And yet there's still opportunities to continue to ensure that all residents really have a good understanding of the conveyance project, and continuing to gather input to ensure that the proposed project considers the community as part of the design and construction process. And as we all know, CEQA has these very formal environmental processes, and DWR is going to be taking the lead on that. The difference is that this can, in our opinion, continue to be a space where community members have the opportunity to talk directly with engineers, with technical people, with project leadership, ask those technical questions and gain important information and project materials. And because this is a Brown Act, these are Brown Act meetings, it's not just going to be impactful, it's going to be transparent communication that is open to all the community to participate in. So again, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have participated. I know it's been a giant sacrifice of time and energy and effort on your part, but you've done great work and we really appreciate everything that you have done. And we appreciate your continued participation. So with that, I will turn it back to Sarah, and I think she'll be introducing our Interim Executive Director, Graham Bradner.
Right, and I just wanted to say thank you, Barbara, for those words. And the work is not done yet. There are still changes to be made. There's still studies to be done. There are still alternatives to be decided on. So basically, that type of information will be provided to the SEC group. It will be provided to you, and again, continuing with your interest and your impact. This is probably one of the most educated groups on this particular topic that you're going to find anywhere. Any rates, so let's continue with item 4A. As we've mentioned previously, the DCA has an interim executive director, Graham Bradner, and he is a familiar face, one of our engineers who has conducted presentations in the past. And so now I'll ask Graham to provide a DCA update and also to provide a reminder of some of the successes that we've seen as a result of the work by the SEC. Graham, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Palmer, and very much appreciate all the introductory information and words there. That was really great. So if you could progress to the next slide, please, Jasmine. First, just to, as you said, Chair Palmer, I know there's a lot of familiarity already, but just wanted to give folks a bit of my background now that I've taken on this additional role. So I've got my bachelor's and master's, both in hydrogeology from Clemson University, about 20 years of industry experience. The last 16 years were with the local office of GEI Consultants, specializing in evaluation, design, and construction of water supply infrastructure and flood risk mitigation infrastructure, primarily in Northern California. I am a California professional geologist and certified engineering geologist and hydrogeologist. I've led projects ranging all the way from feasibility studies through design and construction. While I do have a fair amount of technical experience, I also have background with governance management experience, including managing GEI's engineering division here in town and also serving on GEI's board of directors for the last several years. Beginning in February 2019, I was dedicated full-time to the Delta Conveyance project, initially as the levee and forebay lead, and then also as a deputy to Phil Ryan. You all know Phil very, very well. In that role, I led several program-wide evaluations, was also a regular presenter and participant here in this forum. I think it's important to note that I'll continue to serve as a core member of the engineering team, leading those same efforts going forward, even as I take on the additional responsibilities as the interim executive director. Next slide, please. So with that background and past roles on the project, I do bring continuity in terms of the vision and approach for the DCA, and I want to take a few minutes to highlight that to this group. I know you've been very much the participant in and exposed to these principles. I think you'll find that the guiding principles I want to highlight are consistent with what you've seen from the DCA over the past few years. Continue to operate in a collaborative manner that brings multiple voices and perspectives. Communicate the work we're doing in a transparent way and be sure that we're making very good use of constructive feedback that we receive. Ensure that we're delivering top quality work consistent with a world-class project and organization. Be creative and innovative in our thinking about resolving challenges and opportunities. And again, while collaboration and communication is obviously part of engaging the community, I wanted to call out community specifically to ensure that we're all clear about our commitment to developing a project that reflects community input. Next slide, please. So here we see a conceptual schedule of the DCA's main planning phase activities. I've got the line there flagged as the current date, which also really helps to visualize the transition of the DCA's focus So first, looking back over the past 2.5 years, we developed and provided our key draft concept engineering deliverables for both the Central and Eastern Corridor, as well as the Bethany Reservoir alternative. We also, and those are key so the DWR can perform the environmental assessment process. We launched our geotechnical program and also began the SEC in late 2019, as was already described, to provide this forum for Delta stakeholders to provide input on engineering construction aspects of the project. Next slide, please. So before we start talking about next steps of the DCA, I wanted to just quickly summarize some of the ways that community and specifically SEC feedback was incorporated into the concept designs. Not to say that anyone on the SEC was supportive of the project, but going back to some of those really early discussions that we had in the SEC forum, if there were to be a project, what are the concerns of the Delta community? Where are the opportunities to take in and include the input, and where can we reduce effects? So I've got a couple of examples. These are not going to be, this is not a comprehensive list, but I do think there's some highlights that are notable accomplishments that I wanted to talk about. So first, looking at construction effects, we took a hard look at the construction traffic impacts associated with the intakes, developed a logistics plan that minimizes traffic on existing roads, includes improvements where necessary. Also, we introduced the park and ride facilities as part of that solution to reduce construction traffic, not only at the intakes, but other key parts of the project as well. We also heard feedback from this group on the potential effects of pile driving for the cofferdam associated with construction at the intakes. We took another hard look at those, at options there, and came up with an approach that significantly reduces the amount of pile driving required. Phil reviewed the revised approach with this group, I think, a few meetings back, and it was definitely a significant reduction. Recognizing the magnitude of the construction footprint and the potential impacts that the construction activities may have on the soil foundations, we also spent considerable energy evaluating approaches to restoring some of the major temporary construction areas for future productive agricultural uses or habitat uses, and these approaches were included and incorporated into those conceptual designs. Regarding the siting now, so shifting down to the facility siting, we were able to take a lot of good input from this group and establish a couple of fixed assumptions that significantly affected the siting of infrastructure. For instance, we considered access to existing rail facilities as part of our siting as one of the key criteria for siting the major construction areas to, again, try and reduce construction traffic on the roads. We adjusted the location of maintenance shafts on both Staten and what was Brack. We then moved it to Canal Ranch based on issues that were brought up by Sean Worth associated with Greater Sandhill Cranes. The last two ones are particularly important, I think, by fixing the tunnel launch location at Twin Cities Complex and then establishing that we're going to drive the tunnel, we would drive to intake 5 no matter what the option. We were able to completely remove the Lambert Shaft location from the project entirely. Similarly, by adding a secondary launch shaft at the Southern Complex, so this is the one that's just about a mile north of the initial launch shaft, we were able to eliminate the shaft on Byron that was just east of Discovery Bay and also the shaft on Victoria Island. So this in turn also greatly reduced the construction traffic on Highway 4 and the need for any major modifications on the bridges that are used to access Victoria Island. So those were just a summary of what I viewed as significant accomplishments that were based on a lot of input that we got at this forum. I wanted to swing back around with this group and highlight that. Next slide, please. So having delivered those draft concept design to the environmental team, we're now transitioning to the next part of the planning phase for the DCA. So for the next year or more, we'll be focused on a couple of key tasks: maintaining the core engineering staff to answer questions from the environmental team's process. They may make requests for modifications to the documents or the concept designs. Phil's got a couple examples of those that we're going to be talking about in item 5A today, so you'll see some examples of that. Keeping an eye on the incoming geotechnical data to confirm the assumptions that were used in the conceptual design preparation, continuing with community engagement, and then also providing support to DWR with respect to preparation of permits. And then as we go into FY 22-23, we'll keep all of that going, but also ramp our services back up to support Carrie's team in preparation for public hearings and responding to public comments as Carrie completes her analysis and releases draft documents to the public for comment. A rough estimate at this point, based on the CEQA and NEPA processes, would have the DCA potentially beginning some of the early engineering work on a preferred alternative, maybe out there during FY 23-24, but that would be completely contingent on obtaining the necessary permits and approvals. So all of that is just very forward looking out there as what could be the next stages. So those are the updates that I had prepared. And with that, I would take any questions.
All right. Just one moment. Do we have any hands up?
Well, I think what we're planning on doing is
Barbara Berrigan Priya had her hand up.
I know she did, but she put it down. Barbara, is there something that you wanted?
No, it was operator error on my end.
I get that. I get that.
Valerie, I think because of our packed agenda today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of the items 4, and then at the end, if people could keep track of what their questions were, we will handle all the item 4 questions at that point.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
That's what I have on my.
Sure. Bill does have his hand up. Gil, if it's okay, can we go ahead and hold on to that until we get through a few of these updates? We're moving along pretty quickly.
Yeah, make notes so you don't forget. I'm sure you won't. Okay, forget that is. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask DWR's Environmental Program Manager, Carrie Buckman, to provide an update on the CEQA process. Carrie, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Palmer. So let's go ahead to the next slide. It's good to see everyone again after a couple of months. I'm not going to talk for long today. We're really excited to do the Environmental Justice Survey updates and provide some information. So I want to make sure that a lot of the time is available for that discussion. So just a quick overview of where we are in the environmental process. So next slide. This is just a reminder of where we are in the overall schedule, that we're working towards having an internal first very, very preliminary and somewhat wholly draft in mid-2021, but really focused on working on our draft to release a public draft in about May of 2022. And that is, I keep saying draft as if everyone knows what document that is. We're talking about the Environmental Impact Report under CEQA. The Corps is simultaneously working on an environmental impact statement under NEPA. It is going to be a separate document, but we are looking at coordinating our review periods so that the documents will be available for review at the same time, or at least the review periods will overlap. I think that the CEQA review period, we will probably allow a little bit more time than the Corps will. So public review mid-2022, and then moving towards a final environmental document in late 2023. And we're also starting work on some of the biological impact analysis for the biological assessment. So if we go to the next slide, I have some updates on some of the key pieces that we're working on. So under CEQA, really right now, we're in a phase of the document where we're working really hard, but we don't have a lot to report. A lot of the different impact analysis is underway. We don't have results yet. What we're doing now is analyzing those impacts, and then we'll move towards identifying mitigation measures next. NEPA, the Corps is proceeding to develop an EIS concurrently and are expecting to continue to move ahead and around the same schedule that we have. Soil investigations, we are proceeding with fieldwork under the initial study and mitigated negative declaration that we completed last year. The work started after a winter break in March, and one of the requests that we had during the last SEC meeting was to be able to provide information about what investigations are upcoming. So we now have a map that we're posting on our website. I have the link here. We're posting it every week, and every week we're updating it so it always reflects a 2-week look ahead. So you can see generally where we might be in the next 2 weeks. I do want to flag that it's not an exact map. Things change a fair amount based on landowner preferences or weather or other local conditions, but it is a pretty good estimate of where we'll be in the next 2 weeks, and we update that weekly. And last, I just wanted to mention that we are working on public meetings for the Community Benefits Program framework. We'll talk about those more later during this meeting, but we conducted the first of 3 public workshops in April. We have 2 more in May 6th and May 25th, as well as a tribal focus meeting on May 17th. And I think that those are my updates. I'd ask for any questions, but Chair Palmer says we'll talk about it later. So I guess hold them for later.
We're going to
Thank
hold
you.
them off. Sorry.
Okay.
That means that now we're going to proceed to 4C, which are the SEC questions or comments on February 24th. And Ms. Martinez, can you lead us through the SEC questions from the February meeting?
Sure. Do you want to take the question, again, related to the 2 presentations at this point, and then we can move into the other discussion portion? Are you comfortable with that, or do you just?
Sure. I just want to make sure we're moving on properly. So if it makes sense to have the questions. Let's open that for questions then from the board or from the committee.
Sure. We're doing well on time. We're doing well on time. So
okay.
Gil Cosio has his hand up. Gil, do you want to go ahead and provide your question?
Yeah, I don't want to come across as nitpicky, but in Graham's presentation, he used the word collaboration. And I don't think in the true sense of the word, this is a collaboration. It's more of a compromise. And I have to agree, things have changed in the design based on comments that were brought up, but I think we're more in a compromise position than a collaboration. So I don't really want to be associated with the process that uses that as kind of one of our purposes or whatever, because I don't think it's quite that.
Okay.
Duly noted.
Good point and heard.
All right, Gia Moreno.
Hi, I kind of want to just follow along with that. It was brought up like, oh, that we have an opportunity to talk to engineers and all these other people, but when we ask questions, we're often told that we can't answer that right now, or we don't know, or we have to do a study for that later on. And these are questions that we need to know before any of this even happens. They're not unreasonable requests to find out what's going to happen to us once this all goes down. And to hear, that, oh, like we've been working together, we haven't. It's been a constant, we'll ask questions and make suggestions, and then it just kind of gets like dismissed, and that doesn't feel good. Another thing is with the engineering, I've brought up numerous concerns with HUD in regard to engineering and the access roads and redoing the bridge, and I've been told that I was wrong, even though I've lived there my entire life. So I don't think that it's fair to say that there's been collaboration or that input's been taken seriously.
Okay, thank you, Gia. I'll also note, and because I think you raise a concern about perhaps questions haven't been answered. That sounds like it's worth recirculating the question matrix to ensure that, perhaps you can, the committee can take a look at it and see if in fact, there are some questions on there that have been answered, or if there are further questions that need to be addressed. That might be a really good exercise at this point in the process, because again, there's been a lot of work done, and it's real easy for some of those questions to either have been forgotten and one way or another. So let's make sure that we go ahead and do that. We'll make sure we circulate that document. Committee member Shia.
Well, at the last meeting, I asked Chris Martin about the debt equity ratio, and he kept saying that, oh, well, this is beyond his scope. But I think that, for any investor, stakeholder, debt equity ratio is one of the most important analysis. So I was disappointed that he said that's beyond his scope of the discussion. Yeah.
All right. Now, all right, sounds good, Douglas. Well, again, that's kind of going over some of the discussion that we had at our last meeting. Why don't we go ahead and put that on the matrix and see what we can do about addressing that as we move forward. It may be beyond our scope, but that said, let's put it on there as an item to see if we can go ahead and address it at some point.
Thank you, Valerie.
Absolutely, absolutely. Barbara Bergen-Perea.
Hi, thank you. I have 2 questions for you based on Carrie's report. I understand that there's going to be the completion of hydrological modeling for the project for impacts for 2030 and 27 conditions, and that's going to be done by the end of June. Is that information going to be shared with this committee? Because that has been one of our big questions or big concerns. And this dovetails with it. We also understand that the Bureau of Reclamation has expressed preliminary interest in the tunnel, and that now there's a 7,500 CFS alternative that's in the mix. So does that change design impacts, numbers that we've been given, cubic yards of dirt that's going to be removed? When are we going to be updated on all of these potential changes and the new modeling? Thank you.
It's a great question.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. So a couple of things. So in the NOP, we had identified a range of potential capacities for the alternatives. And we talked about this pretty early on, but we haven't really talked about it a lot since then, that we had asked the DCA right from the beginning to develop information for a 3,000, a 4,500, a 6,000, and a 7,500 CFS version of the eastern and central alignments. So as the DCA has been doing their design, even though at the time we hadn't really gotten too far into the alternatives analysis, we thought that there would be economies of scale of looking at those four capacities right up front. So the work that the DCA has done so far has always included all four of those capacities for those two alignments. The 3,000, 4,500, and 6,000 only include State Water Project participation. For the 7,500, it does include a connection to CVP facilities. Reclamation has not at this point indicated interest in participating, but because we had a record available from WaterFix that they could potentially at some point be interested, we thought that people might want to see what the effects would be for an alternative. It is not at this point the proposed project because they haven't indicated interest, but it does provide an alternative analysis for a different alternative to see the comparison of benefits and adverse effects.
Okay, Carrie,
So,
there's a breakdown somewhere in the system because the contractors under Kern County Water Agency are saying that the preliminary request has been made. And, you know, this is the stuff that keeps me up awake at night. There's always what we're looking at the surface and what is really happening. So somewhere in your world of things, somebody thinks there's a bigger tunnel coming and that the Bureau is already involved.
So I will follow up on that, but the request for reclamation's involvement would come through DWR and has not yet. I mean, we've certainly considered whether that could happen with a different administration, but it has not. So I will follow up with others to understand more on that.
Okay.
For the modeling, we are working on hydraulic modeling, hydrologic operations simulations. It is not scheduled to be done immediately, especially the future analysis. We are working on scheduling technical meetings for the summer that we talk a little bit more about our approach and present some of the basic information. So we'll be having more about that in June, July, and August. It will not be an SEC meeting because it is sort of a CEQA specific discussion. So DWR will have public meetings on that topic. When we look at future scenarios, we aren't looking at 2030, we're looking at a 2040, and then we're looking qualitatively at 2070. And that's something we'll talk a lot more about during our technical discussions this summer.
Okay, if you could please, if the committee isn't going to receive such a presentation, because you have to keep it separate, can you please just make sure that we're notified so that we know the timing of those meetings?
Absolutely, and we're hoping that people will participate. So Janet is actually going to talk a little bit more about that later. Janet Barbieri is our communications manager, so she's on the agenda today, and that's one of the topics for discussion, but we will definitely make sure all the meeting notifications come to this group as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Committee member Anna Swenson.
Yes, thank you. So I totally agree with Gil, and we could either be in a compromise or we could be compromised, but this has not been a collaborative process where we are supporting this project or think that this project is necessarily a good thing or a good buy or, you know, good infrastructure for our money. I think that we should go back to what Newsom said, which is fix the infrastructure that we have currently before we start building any new. And I'm going to keep pounding that drum. But I definitely feel as though some of the changes that have been made is more like shuffling, deck chairs on a sinking Titanic than anything that would actually tangibly change the dramatic and devastating effects that this project will have on the local communities. We have such bad traffic issues right now if one bridge is down or there's an accident or anything. And I always look at that as I see traffic backing up, and I think, how are they ever going to, how are these farmers ever going to make it through that? How are they ever going to get their harvest picked or get stuff planted? And it's a little disingenuous to go to a meeting like the Delta Stewardship Council that I was at just the other day and say, oh, we've got it all figured out, because placing haul roads against people's will is not the solution. That is a catastrophic result of a project that is being shoved down our throats. That is not a solution that has come up in the name of community or compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And you raised the issue that I think I will repeat right now, and I know that we try to use it as a mantra out of respect when we start the meeting and throughout the meeting, that participation in this discussion in no way, shape, or form indicates support for the project. What it indicates is that you are truly committed to your communities and you are deciding to participate in this process. So in the event a project is built, it is built in a manner that is appropriate for the community. So we continue to thank you for all of that. I think, it's a difficult process. So thank you for your participation. Okay.
And if I could add just one quick thing, I mean, I noticed this with the input that we're getting. We have to be, and I speak of all of us here, that we have to be so very careful of the vocabulary we use in order to respect what your positions are, because as you said, it is not collaborative. It is something where you're giving input and listening, and I think the whole thing that keeping you up to date in terms of what meetings are coming up is something that we definitely want to be continuing, even as we may cut back on the number of meetings we have. Your need to be informed and to know when key meetings are going on is crucially important, and I think we have to keep that in mind. But thank you for kind of like the language check, because I think it's crucially important to all of us to make sure we use the right language on this.
Thank you, Chair Palmer. Now, Chair Palmer already introduced the SEC questions or comments on the February SEC meeting. We've already had one comment related to that. Are there any other issues? As a reminder, because that was 2 months ago, there was discussion about the Bethany alternative. There was discussion about geotechnical field work, and there was an update related to that. There was also the project financing overview. It was a pretty action-packed meeting, just as this one is. So if anyone has any questions or comments, it's a good time to discuss. Otherwise, and we continue to say, please go ahead and send over your questions by email. If in fact something comes up to you or strikes you tomorrow or in 2 weeks or whatever, go ahead and send text. You can call anyone on the staff. There is absolutely a desire to provide information and move that information into the community. So please do, ask for any clarifications as needed.
So I'm not seeing any hands.
Is this a call for comments on item 4C, which is the February meeting?
Yes, ma'am. And so I'm not seeing any hands. So
okay.
I think we can move on to.
Okay, let's move on to item 5. Now, what we're going to do for item 5 as well is I would like to have us go through.
We need to do public comment on
public comment on item 4. Okay, let's open public comment.
I don't think we have anyone who's put in a request. That said, I think we just needed to call it out. So unless Jennifer.
That is correct, Valerie. This is Claudia. I just wanted to confirm we have not received any public comment requests at this time.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
So and it is a 4:45. And again, we request that any public comments please be submitted by 4 o'clock. So if you're thinking about talking, now's a good time to submit your request, please.
Right. Okay, so we've opened and closed public comment, and the SEC has made their comments on item 4. So now we're going to move on to item 5, which is the technical comments. And what we're going to do with that one is, again, since it's going to be fairly full, we're going to, unless there's something that, obviously, if something really is a hot button and you absolutely need to ask it, SEC members do so. But let's try to have those item 5 numbers, item 5 presentations, and then we'll open it up for questions. So make sure you make notes so you don't forget what you wanted to ask. Okay, so moving on to item 5A. Graham, would you please introduce Phil Ryan, and he will provide an update on the design changes.
Absolutely. So Phil's going to provide an update in the design. This is design work associated with Bethany and Central and Eastern, different elements of the project. These adjustments are the direct result of feedback that we've received, and as well as the ongoing design work. So I do think it does demonstrate that there is input that's being incorporated into the conceptual design that's being further evaluated through the environmental process. So with that, Phil, would you please take it away?
Okay, thanks, Graham. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be back. So I've got 3 design changes to talk about today. They kind of help illustrate the process that we will continue to go through with the DCO as they evaluate the project. So next slide, please. I'll just dive into them one at a time. First one is changes to the Southern Forebay complex power supply. I'm only going over it for the Southern Forebay here. The same thing will apply to the Bethany power supply, and I'll kind of tell you how that goes, but the slides are all for the Southern Forebay. As you may recall, we had always wanted 2 power feeds for redundancy and reliability. So we would feed from down on the bottom of the page, conceptually from WAPA, and up at the top of the page from PG&E. Now recognize we don't have actual agreements with any of these folks yet, but these are reasonable places where there's sufficient power exists to potentially hook up to the system. So you can see that the different colors there show where the corridors are, where they were and what they were. So there's very small pieces of underground, mostly on site. There's a big chunk coming up from WAPA in the south that was overhead power that was parallel to existing power, and then a smaller chunk on the piece coming down from PG&E. And then some, the golden lines there would be new power corridors of above ground towers. So let's go to the next slide. You can see that what's happened is because the 2 power providers are both in the same balancing area, there's balancing issues with being able to provide that redundant power. And it has to do with the size of the loads. You just can't automatically switch from one to the next and expect to really get the reliability you want, given the size of the loads we have for the pumping plant. So because the infrastructure would be less, we're going with the WAPA system. So you can see that removes about 7 miles of the power corridor coming down from Brentwood. By that going away, removes almost all of the urban and rural residential footprint of that power facility. Not that there aren't people along the WAPA facility, but most of the people who would live directly along that facility there's already a fairly hefty power corridor along there. So anyway, it helps with reduce some of the impacts associated with that. So that's the change that's going ahead now. As some of you remember, could you go back up 1 slide, please? No, the other way. One more. So that one that came down from Brentwood, it would have continued, it would have followed down, it would have followed the green line along the side of the Southern Complex facilities and extended down to Bethany. And then Bethany's obviously right next to the WAPA facility at the bottom. So by eliminating the, more extensive improvements associated with the PG&E one and using the WAPA one, we've eliminated that whole stretch going down to Bethany as well. So go ahead, let's move on to the second change.
Can we go back so that they can actually see that? It's 2 slides in a row and it didn't click all the way through. So see, that's what it was. And then there you go.
Yeah.
Magic.
And the same thing is going to happen with these slides. So,
but I think it's important too, because we provide these presentations to the SEC members, and I want to make sure that they're clear what those differences are. Sorry.
So the next change was the road up to Bethany Reservoir for the Bethany Reservoir discharge structure, which is up there at the top of that yellow area. The original alignment, the goal was to follow existing roads to minimize impacts in the area. And at the time when we, did that, I guess in good faith, you might call it, to try and minimize that footprint, we would have had to widen the road because the road needs to carry some pretty hefty construction traffic. And it's basically a very sort of narrow farm road or range road, if you will, now, and wasn't wide enough. So it would have been improvements that would have increased the footprint of that road. Also, because of the grades, and construction equipment needs to have the grades down at a lower level, we would have had a massive road cut up about where the N in Newhall Road is. There was going to be a large cut, and that's up on the hillside, would have been visible from a fair distance. So the DCO's EIR team went out and started looking at the impacts of our facilities, and they defined this alkali wetlands, which is a sensitive wetland area that are a little bit more rare than other wetland types in California. And the goal on a situation like this would be to try and avoid the impacts to that wetlands. So we went ahead and tried to and looked at a couple of alternatives, and go ahead to the next slide. And we settled on a new road alignment. Now, this new road alignment is not on an existing road, but it takes advantage of the topography so that it's essentially the same length of road out there. But the road cut is, because of the way using the existing topography, the road cut is much smaller. So from a far distance, the visual impacts of the road should be less. And there's less dirt to move down to the stockpile areas and all that from a road that's constructed in this area. And most importantly, it completely eliminated the additional footprint within the wetlands area. So that was a good change there. So let's move on to the next one. So this is a very similar change and came about from the exact same process, but you can see kind of in the just below the southern forebay there on the left side, there's a wetlands in there. And those were the impacts. The rail is the orange line on the right. And then that kind of angular one to the left of it was the access road that went up there. And you can see they went right through the middle of that alkali wetlands there as well. And the original configuration was set up to minimize the length of rail and, obviously the impacts that go along with building that, and the same thing with the roads. So go ahead to the next one. So in order to avoid, again, the wetlands, we rerouted the railroad and then brought the road over into a parallel path. So they both skirt the very edge and for the most part miss the wetlands. There's still a little bit of footprint because we can't get over any further than we've gotten there. Caused us to realign the roads a little bit, but not a great deal. And in the end, it actually, we had to move a few things around on the Southern Forebay site, but they didn't affect the functionality of those things. And the reality is even the yellow area got a skosh smaller because of doing this. So I guess the point of these three changes is to help you illustrate these are the things that the DCO continues to bring to us from the people who are working with the power agencies. These two here are wetlands, and we, I'm sure there'll be other things. There's a couple other things that we're working on now that I'm not sure they'll result in changes or not, but the things that the DCO brings to our attention, and then we decide what to do with them, similar in a way to what we did with some of the concerns that you folks brought up. So anyway, I guess I'm not sure if I'm taking questions or if I'm holding to the end as
Yeah,
well.
I was thinking as we're going through these items on 5 that maybe after each of those, we'll take questions from the SEC and we'll do public comments after all of the number 5 questions are done. But the SECs can certainly ask questions after each of these items.
Okay, I'm ready.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Palmer. Barbara Berrigan-Perea.
I looked it up while you were talking. WAPA is
Western Area Power Authority.
Yeah. So are they actually a federal power distributor? Is it a different grid?
I don't know the details of it. We'd have to talk to somebody else. Like we can follow up with you, but they are mainly a distribution entity, as I understand it. I don't think, I mean, they obviously have a lot of hydroelectric facilities around the West that they move power for. I'm not sure that they actually own those power facilities or not. But they can we can put power on the grid, and it can be wheeled to WAPA and then distributed to us.
So I guess I'm really interested through WAPA in understanding the sources of power for the project there.
That's a good question, and I don't actually know where the ultimate source of the additional power is. So I don't know. The DCO team is working on that, and I just can't speak for them right now.
Okay, if we could know at a later date, that would be helpful. Thank you.
We are noting that. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, Michael Moran.
Hey, Phil, thanks very much. This is a great presentation. Just 2 questions. One about the Hall Road that goes up to Bethany. That's going to be a new road. When the construction is done, will that Hall Road stay there or would it be restored?
That's a good question, Mike. There's so many of these roads, some of them stay, some of them get restored. I don't actually remember on this one. I believe it will stay though.
Okay, just to consider, it's a big foraging area for listed species for birds.
Yep.
Migratory area. So minimizing any impact along those grasslands and open lands is going to be really important. And then the other one is for this slide that's up right now. That wetland, the new Hall Road or rail is bordering that. I'm sure folks will do this, but I want to make sure it's said to consider drainage patterns and substrate. Those are hard pan soils, so any disturbance could change the hydrology within the wetland, even though it's not, the construction is not on the wetland. So just to keep that in consideration. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Karen Mann, you have your hand up.
I do. Can you hear me?
You can.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for that presentation, Graham. I really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions, as you knew you would expect some from me. I noticed that you're talking about putting in a heliport and first aid center. That makes a lot of sense, except there is an airport very, very close to this potential project. Why wouldn't you use the airport?
We actually might. I think right now, Karen, the EPR provisions are to reserve space and footprint for these types of items, but I don't think the final details of how emergency response at each of these sites, I think that's yet to be worked out with the local agencies and, obviously the project proponents. I don't think we wanted to speak for the airport at this time, but we certainly could work with the airport to do that, because if we did have the facilities on site and a decent travel path up there, that's certainly a possibility.
Okay, that was question number one. Thank you for answering that. How does the Byron Highway, the orange line that you have there, how does that interact with the expansion of Byron Highway from Discovery Bay, Brentwood to Mountain House, where you see that the 4 lanes are being expanded? Would that be a part of it, was to expand the 4 lanes?
Yeah, now for the central and east option that's on the screen, we wouldn't be expanding the Byron Highway. However, like you can see the roundabout in the picture there, that is intended to be consistent with one of the alternatives that they're planning for the changes out there. I think the concept is as the, I forget the name of the Contra Costa County organization. There's an authority that's been formed for this road. They're still working through their alternatives, and the intention is to be compatible with whatever it is they decide to do. So we've purposely tried to not step on their footprint and to be compatible with their changes. Now, relative to Mountain House, that's mainly applicable to the Bethany alternative. And for the Bethany alternative, we would extend their 4-lane expansion up to the new Lindeman Road interchange, as we've gone through in previous SECs as to, all the different paths that get you to Bethany. Now, the details about where Mountain House is in doing that work are yet to be worked out because they're not sure of their timing.
Okay. One more question. Well, actually 2 more questions. They'll be quick though. So with the construction of a project of this intensity, would there be a new fire station built in Byron?
Again, the emergency response plan right now has the facility at the site, but that we are absolutely, the team, and I'm sure the project proponents are open to working with the local communities to figure out how that might actually get final service. But right now, I believe there's room for 1 fire truck and the contractor crew on the site, so that we would.
Because there's no fire station at all in Byron, just FYI.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's one nearby that's closed, right?
Oh, yeah, that one's closed, and Discovery Bay had 2, but one of them's closed. So we have one that services Discovery Bay, Byron, and all that farmland area.
I think the goal is not to put. I gotta be careful how I say this. What we're trying to do in the footprint information for the EIR would be not to put additional burden on the local facilities. That being said, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't potentially work with the local utility or the local emergency service providers to help either fully or partly in providing some of those services later on.
Okay. Now, I'm sure you're acutely aware because of where this is actually at. You have an intersection, and I know this because I'm from the area. There's a point where Alameda, Contra Costa, and San Joaquin, you take 1 step to the left, 1 step to the right. Your body can be in all 3 counties right in this vicinity.
Right.
And so I'm sure that's going to add a little bit more to the complexity.
Absolutely, because there's some, particularly on Bethany, because we really are in all 3 of them more so than we are for Central and East. And yeah, there's especially for emergency response as to who's really responsible for serving the area.
Well, Mountain House has 1 fire station.
Right.
And
I believe they're San Joaquin County.
Yes, they are San Joaquin County.
And I believe the facility itself is in Alameda County.
Well, the nearest fire station for Alameda County is Livermore.
Right. Yeah,
that's kind of a problem.
Right. And that's why we're proposing to, at least for now, accounting for having emergency response on site.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Karen. Great conversation. Thank you for raising those issues. The fire issue and the public safety issue, it's always good to have those conversations in front of everyone, frankly, because that's knowledge you have that not everyone has. So that's good to raise those issues and for Phil to ensure that we're aware of them. Committee member Anna Swenson.
Yes, thank you. So, Phil, thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering if there was a name or a way to identify what that wetland is. Is it a protected wetland? That's very concerning for me to see a wetland in the middle, literally, of a bullseye of construction for this project. So I would like, please follow up on, what you guys are going to do to try to mitigate any hazard or destruction to that wetland. And I would really appreciate if there's a name or a way that is commonly identified, that'd be really great too. Thank you.
Yeah, so Anna, on that, and I know sometimes this is the things that you guys aren't always happy about, but the DCO does the wetlands evaluations. We simply try and get out of them when they tell us they're there. So from the DCA's perspective, I'd have to turn to Carrie for a name about any details about the wetlands and about what mitigations might be carried out because of our proximity to them. So I don't mean to dodge the question, but I don't really have those answers.
I can chime in a little. Sure. So, Anna, I don't think that there are names for these wetlands. They're just wetlands that we've identified as part of our process to map the wetlands and waters of the U.S. In general, as we've been looking at the potential effects, our first step is to try to avoid effects where we can. So that's where we're coming back to the DCO or DCA and saying, hey, can we move these facilities? Are there options to avoid impacts, at least parts of the impacts, if not completely? Our next step is that we will be analyzing the remaining effects and identifying mitigation. This is sort of that awkward phase, though, of where we are in the process where we haven't gotten there yet. So we will be looking at whether we need to incorporate additional mitigation, but we don't know that quite yet.
Great. Thanks, Carrie.
But this question will be added to the matrix so we can look back later, maybe when that process is moving through, right?
Absolutely.
Good point.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, Mike Moran.
Hey, Anna, this is Mike. Just a reference for you and for everybody else here. Eastern Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy. They might have some kind of a designation for that wetland. Just something to look up, another source. Thanks.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, and we have no other hands up. Chair Palmer, do you want to move forward?
Great. Thank you very much. I think especially this idea that people have been bringing up about fire stations in light of our more intense fires in the state, we really all have to pay attention to this, not just the Department of Water Resources, but all of us need to. Okay, so here we go. To item 5B, this is ongoing outreach efforts. So Valerie, would you please provide the next introduction on that?
Sure, just providing some context. A lot of the committee has raised on a number of occasions a desire to have a greater understanding of outreach efforts in order to ensure, because they've raised concerns about the fact that a lot of folks in the Delta are not aware of the project or don't have a deeper understanding, such in the same way that the SEC does. And so in talking to both Janet and Nasli, both of them wanted to provide information to the SEC in order to ensure that you are aware of the efforts that are being undertaken, and also, ultimately after the fact, because it's a packed agenda, there's always opportunities, obviously, for members to provide thoughts about, hey, and you're always being invited to to note if in fact a community group or an area needs some targeted outreach, needs a presentation. That invitation is going to continue. So after these presentations, if you could, feel free to email some thoughts, email some augmentations, some thoughts on areas or materials that would be helpful, all of those sorts of things, I think that would be welcomed. And so from that perspective, Janet, if you want to go ahead and start your presentation. Janet Barbieri.
Yep. Hello, everybody. I apologize for not putting myself on the screen. I've got some connectivity challenges, so I think it's safer to just be on the audio part. But if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, Valerie described it pretty well, but I just thought it would be helpful to describe a little bit about some of the activities that we have planned over the next year and a half or so, primarily with the goals of providing public information, building awareness in the community, providing access to information, transparency, providing avenues to the planning process. And at the moment, that's largely the CEQA process, the environmental review process, but there are some other elements, and then public input as well. So I'm just going to go through some of the activities that we have planned. So next slide, thank you. So just a general overview, there's 6 different areas. One is public information. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail in a minute about what encompasses each one of these things. But for public information, it's really just the whole suite of informational tools. We are planning on doing some informational webinars later this year. I would say summer, maybe June-ish to September-ish. And that'll provide a deeper dive into some of the topics that we know are of interest in advance of the EIR. There's the Community Benefits Program, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in this meeting today. There's, of course, the stakeholder engagement work. Naslie's going to talk more about that just in a minute following me. Then there's the public participation element, and then there's, of course, agency coordination, and that's just acknowledging that there are a number of planning and permitting activities and coordination with those agencies. And in some cases, there's public participation elements as well. So the next slide. Before going into some of the details for all of those activities, I did want to mention that there is a focused tribal outreach effort. 2 things really. One is to ensure compliance with AB 52 through formal consultation, and the other is to ensure input and engagement across all of the public information and public participation activities program-wide, and that includes more informal discussions with tribes and tribal members, a tribal engagement committee, and then an annual tribal informational meeting. Next slide. I also wanted to just mention that there is a focused environmental justice outreach effort. And this, in the same vein, the idea here is that we know how important the environmental justice outreach component is. And so we do have special consultants on board, Ag Innovations, to help us ensure that all of the activities that we're doing, outreach activities program-wide, that we follow the best practices for engagement with disadvantaged communities. And so we've thought about doing things like virtual workshops and, possibly in coordination with EJ-focused organizations, and also just really being cognizant of and being responsive to any particular EJ needs as we, move through the environmental review process, and in particular, once the draft environmental impact report is available, that we do that there as well. Next slide. So in terms of activities for public information, that's really the types of things that we do that are like our e-blasts or blogs, fact sheets, videos, presentations, briefings, other media. We do something called deep dive videos. So we've been trying to take some of the discrete topics and turning those into videos with our technical experts so that we can provide information and we'll also be trying to take those and turning those into shorter videos, because some of those are pretty long, but we're trying to, do these things in different ways to reach different people. People like to receive their information in different ways. So we're trying to be as, comprehensive and responsive as possible. Again, in terms of the informational webinars, the idea here is that I'm sure everyone remembers from years past that our environmental documents are pretty comprehensive. And so we wanted to just acknowledge that. And in the lead up to when the draft environmental impact report becomes available next year, we wanted to provide some background information about different areas that will be covered in the EIR. So for example, providing information about our assumptions and our methodology and things like that. So we thought that it would be a helpful way to just try to provide, bite-sized chunks of information leading up to the CEQA document. We're going to talk a little bit more about the community benefits program momentarily. And Nazi will talk a little bit more about the stakeholder engagement, about the DCA efforts. And then of course there's public participation, and that's really straight up public review and comment. And as I mentioned, there's it's primarily at the moment we're focused on the environmental impact report, but there are other planning and permitting activities and the agency coordination that goes along with that. So stop there, maybe go to the next slide. And Nasli, you can take it from here.
Thanks, Janet. We wanted to do this presentation because as DCA, as our sort of cadence slows down a little bit, the majority of our work has gone over to DWR, and now we're sort of waiting for feedback on what DWR will need over the course of the next year as they prepare their EIR. So I want to go through, because I know we were doing our SEC meetings twice a month, once a month, and we're really slowing down the cadence a little bit as there's less material to go over. But it affords us an opportunity. We have heard loud and clear the materials we present are quite dense and just complicated and complex. So there's a chance for us over the course of the next year in trying to think about how to take those materials and be responsive to the fact that there are folks who still don't feel like they understand enough about the project. How we can essentially kind of repackage those materials. And I mean that in every way. It could include translations, kind of taking out certain bits if somebody wants just a presentation on intakes and things like that, but really thinking about how to kind of repackage our materials. So we'll keep our stakeholder engagement committee meetings going for as long as it makes sense. Our virtual tours, we're doing both Spanish and Chinese translations. I believe that Mandarin Chinese translations for those in order to be able to reach more folks. We'll have informational video series similar to the virtual tour, sort of in, but again, sort of something that's a little bit more graphic that'll help explain some of our concepts. Our website remains a great resource. I think, again, I'm sort of always picky about websites. I think there's ways we can optimize it, make it easier to find materials and whatnot, and expand our offerings. And then we continue with our social media updates and information sharing through Facebook, Twitter, and all our social media channels. Our monthly newsletters, we thought we'd start that out. If you're not signed up, we'll get folks started up. And always happy to provide our SEC meeting summaries and always presentations and materials for community groups as requested. We try to do our best to be as proactive as possible, but there are different groups and different sort of interest groups that, if you're in Hood, you might just care about the impacts of traffic on Hood. And if you would like a presentation on that, please don't be shy in asking us. And that goes for everything around the projects. We are more than happy to come out to folks. I think the hardest thing for us to tackle is when folks say they don't know anything about the project, and when we offer to meet, they refuse. Again, I'm sort of very sensitive to what Gil said about collaboration. I appreciate the distinction there. But I think that there's a role in which we can at least make sure that folks are educated. We've never tried to sort of sway opinion on the project, but we do try to make sure people have the right facts. That's always kind of important, or just even the right information. We may not always even agree on what we think facts are. And that's it. And as I said, between Janet's team and ours, it has always been really collaborative. So again, as we sort of take a little bit more of a backseat, DWR continues to do their immense outreach efforts as well. So yeah, hopefully that'll give you all an idea of all the ways we can sort of get information out to you and help explain the project further to folks.
Thanks, Nasli. Appreciate that. Hopefully that begins to shed some light on the number of efforts that are out there trying to push information out. It's complicated. It's a hard project. It's a complex project, and it's a large region. So that continues to try to be a partnership truly from the standpoint of how can the organization provide information that then perhaps the SCC members can move forward to the individual constituencies. We do have a couple of hands up. Committee member Anna Slinson. And one other thing that I'll note, and I kind of mentioned this before, because honestly, there could be a whole workshop on public outreach. Feel free to, include thoughts via email, because, it's a packed agenda. And there are a lot of really good ideas out there. So, that's definitely a way to try to move that discussion forward. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Anna. Go ahead.
No problem. So really appreciate it, Nasli. Very comprehensive list. The only problem is that 99% of it relies on broadband. And until we overcome the inequity that is happening to the children here in the Delta, forget the adults, the kids in the Delta who are not provided with broadband, the adults who are not provided with broadband and have to stand on the levees and hold their phones up and try and receive service. I just don't think that you're going to reach the people that you really are. I totally validate the fact that you're trying to reach people. I just don't know how you're going to overcome that when we have such a terrible issue of broadband in the Delta. And it's sad that our governor has put zero effort or thought into that, because there's a lot of people and kids out here who would very much benefit from having a level playing field. Thank you.
Yeah, Anna, I think that's a really great point. And I will say this, I don't know how comfortable I would feel or others would feel about indoor meetings yet, even if folks are fully vaccinated. There's some advantage, just given the weather, of being able to put together outdoor meetings, but I am sensitive to that. And, before, back when the world was open, we were dropping off materials and whatnot at the libraries and the post offices. And I think that there's a level of comfort for staff, at least, to be able to bring materials to folks. And depending on, it just has to be a mutual agreement of what seems safe when it comes to meeting. But we are, I think, getting ready to sort of be able to hold smaller meetings in person. And again, I think there has to be a conversation with all parties involved on whether or not those should be in person or not, or it could just be meeting material drop-offs, and then whatever it is, as you said, to kind of get over that hump of inequity we're very open to it. And my guess is that by the summer, that's hopefully something that we can, kind of start moving ahead on, or the fall.
Basically, if the SCC members have ideas in terms of where else we can drop things off and what else we can drop things off, please let us know, and we'll do our very best to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
Really great points. Thank you. We have Gia, Douglas, and Cece who have their hands up. Committee member Gia Moreno.
Hi. I just want to piggyback off of what I know Nasli responded, but off of what Anna said. There is and it's something I brought up before, that all these things are great if you have access to the internet. These meetings require access to the internet, and I appreciate the materials that we were given, but they are complicated, especially when they're like, we can look at these PowerPoints and we can say, okay, this is what it's about, because we know. But if you're just the average person, they don't know. And I've shown them to people and they're like, I don't understand what this is about. And so it's disingenuous to say like, oh, we've done all this research and our outreach and people understand, when it really hasn't been able to, like, and even the translation things, they really haven't been able to reach as many people as it's been claimed that we've been reaching.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, I'm not putting numbers on things or making any claims. I think we remain really open and always in terms of, I don't think we've reached as many people as we'd like to. I think that's a two-way street. Again, I go back to, I think.
Okay, yeah, because one of the last meetings you said like, oh, the attendance for these meetings has increased 300%. But when I look at, the participants of these meetings, everybody is either SEC or DWR or DCA, and there aren't that many people that are actually just regular old community members.
And that's true. It's still increased massively because there were so few people at the in-person meetings. But again, we don't try to paint a picture, say, oh yeah, the 86 people here, or sometimes there's been more.
Yeah, but they're also at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which like for me, I had to be a little bit late today. So saying that, oh, they've increased 300% isn't really, for who?
Well, here's the thing, not to go back and forth because I think we want to keep moving, but the numbers are the numbers. If there are folks here and the numbers, and they're not our staff, and we're very transparent with who that is, and not SEC, those are folks who are attending the meeting. And so it's not about us trying to lie about the numbers, or there's more people. I think there's some advantages. I think there's some people who do have broadband access, and it means they're able to attend the meetings in a way they certainly were not when it was about 10 to 12 people showing up at the in-person meetings. So I'm not sort of saying, putting a flag down and saying, this is the absolute best situation.
Okay, and then even with the meetings though, I know for people in Hood that they were given, sent like a tiny postcard that looked like junk mail, with the meeting dates on it, and it wasn't really explained. A tiny postcard. It wasn't explained what the meeting was or the importance of it. So the stuff is, can be misleading. So yeah, you're not going to have a whole lot of participants when nobody really knows what it is, or they've tossed it because it looks like junk mail.
Sure, and I'm going to go back to your role, Gia, as an SEC member. That is kind of the whole point of the SEC, right? First of all, they haven't been. We literally would go when they were in person and put tape notices up to the post offices and the libraries. Yes, there would also be postcards. They're easy to carry. They're easy to put around. Materials would be dropped off in places. But I think that there's got to be a two-way street. You can't sort of, in as far as I'm saying, yes, I don't think that we do we've hit everybody 100% and we are willing to work with anyone to get there. I think it's not fair as the Hood representative to say this isn't happening. So call me. This is the job. This was the point, is that you're supposed to help with the outreach to these folks.
Natalie, that's not fair because I've been doing it since I've been the Hood representative. I've been taking the materials that have been given to me and passing them around. But I'm talking about previously, before that position was even created, there wasn't any outreach, and the people that you had designated as our quote unquote representatives didn't even know that that was their position.
And I think our role now is that we have time to get folks before, and then we really are going to move on. We have time now to work with you to make sure folks have the info, because there's an EIR, and that's really where the public comment.
Okay, I would appreciate if you got it to me, Nosley.
And that would, guys, one thing I don't want to have a back and forth on this. If there's a need for improvement in some way, then please let us know, and we will do our very best to do so. So let's move on. Do we have anybody else?
Yeah, we do. And one thing I do want to note that is actually from a technical standpoint, I think really good information, because I don't think a lot of people know this, is that the meetings can actually be accessed via phone. And our technical expert on this aspect is Jennifer Malone. Jennifer, do you want to just chime in real quick on what people need to do in order to access the meetings by phone? Because I don't think a lot of people know that that's actually an option.
Absolutely. So every meeting notice, the agenda, everywhere that we post any sort of meeting information, whether it be in the lobby or at any post office, etc., always contains the phone number and the access code to access the meeting. So you can always call in. I agree that it's not the best experience simply because you can't see everything, but I just want to make sure that everybody was aware that you can call into the meetings.
That would be great if we had cell phone service. Thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you, Gia. Gia, again, you continue to be a really valuable bit of information and knowledge for Hood. So thank you. And it sounds like an ongoing issue that we need to continue to work on. Douglas. Shia, could you, I see your hand is up.
Great. I'd just like to know that how does the DWR conduct the outreach differently from DCA?
Janet, do you want to take that?
Hey, Janet, are you?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, sure. So, primarily the outreach that DWR conducts is really focused on kind of everything related to public information and public participation for the whole program. And so everything related to like next year when the draft environmental impact report comes out, then we'll be responsible for that. All of the public information about the program. And so all of our fact sheets and background information and background videos and reporters that call with queries, we handle all of that. And the DCA's focus, the things that Natalie just went through, are really more focused on the discrete issues around design and engineering issues. So we kind of cover the whole program, and the DCA covers just those things that are the purview of the DCA. Does that help? If not, let me know and I can try to be more explanatory.
Crystal now, thank you.
Okay.
We like Crystal. Thanks, Douglas. All right, and moving on to the next item, Chair Palmer.
Okay, that's great. You previously had a presentation by Genevieve Taylor with Ag Innovations when the Environmental Justice Survey was launched. And today Genevieve is back and she's going to provide an update on the survey results. And this, once again, is one of the benefits of being on the SEC, is getting these updates even prior to the report being complete and released. So Genevieve, if you go ahead and start your presentation.
And just to note to everyone involved, we have about 30 minutes for this discussion. So just to kind of keep everyone on point, I'm just noting that there's about 30 minutes for this presentation. Go ahead, Genevieve.
All right, everyone. It's good to be here and really a great opportunity to share the results and to thank those of you who supported getting this survey out on environmental justice. And for those who don't know me, I am Executive Director at Ag Innovations. Ag Innovations is a nonprofit that focuses on collaboration at the intersection of these complex ag and natural resources issues. And we work in community engagement as well in this world, which is why we've taken on environmental justice and outreach to the disadvantaged communities of the Delta. So let's go on to the next slide. The goal of the Your Delta, Your Voice survey was to gather direct input from the disadvantaged communities in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta region about how they work, live, recreate, and experience the Delta. We had a focus on communities that are historically burdened, underrepresented, people of color, and low-income communities of interest, including Indigenous and tribal members. So that was really our focus, and we'll share with you how we worked with that. And I just want to say that in this presentation, I'm going to really focus on the results, and I can speak to outreach if folks are interested in that, but this will be really focused on what we learned from those who participated. So the way that, first of all, just the results, we had 2,117 total participants, and of those, 540 were Delta region DAC participants. And what I mean by that is they were a Delta region disadvantaged community participants. And I'll be using that term somewhat interchangeably. They mean the same thing. Sometimes I use the shorthand of DAC. So a DAC is defined as non-white or has a household income of less than 60,000, or they were designated by zip code as we use something called Cal EnviroScreen and the DWR severely disadvantaged community guidance for that. So it's by zip code and their household income is less than 75,000. The other thing is that then there was a subset of that group, which is the Delta region severely disadvantaged community participants. And an SDAC is defined as household income is less than 45,000, or by zip code and their household income is less than 60,000. So, you know, in this presentation, I'll be focusing on Delta region SDAC and Delta region DAC. One other thing, actually a couple other things to note is that Delta region, we wanted to be inclusive. And so we actually defined it with a 5-mile statute, around the 5-mile statutory boundary of the Delta, so that we can include, you know, many communities who feel very connected, would consider themselves part of the Delta, but may not be within the actual statutory Delta line. The other thing I think that's good to note is that we did have the survey translated into Chinese, into Mandarin Chinese and Spanish. And of those participants, we had 311 participants of the Chinese survey and then 12 of the Spanish survey. And we can talk a little bit more about that effort a bit later. So one of the questions that we asked was, have you ever participated before in a public process related to a Delta Tunnel proposal? And that was a really, I would say this was an interesting result out of the answers. You can see that over 60% in the Delta DAC respondents, in the Delta SDAC respondents, and then also in the all respondents had never participated in a Delta Tunnel proposal process. So we felt like we made inroads with this form into members who hadn't been engaged before of the Delta region. You know, one other thing that I'll say about all respondents before we move on is that some people, the way that we defined Delta region or DAC or SDAC was when folks gave their income or their language or ethnicity, and some just chose not to. So all respondents includes people from throughout the state and perhaps beyond who care about the Delta, but they also include Delta region respondents that just didn't identify themselves. So I think that's why we included that. And I think that's an important piece to note as we're looking at all of these results. So another question we asked is, what's most important to you? And for those of you who took the survey, you'll know that there was the first screen where we had the participant drag different priorities above a line. So you could choose up to 6. You could also suggest your own priority. And I think it's good to see here that clean air and drinking water and natural environment were the top 2. The third was well-maintained levees. And there was a bit of difference in order. So for Delta region DAC participants and Delta region SDAC participants, clean air and drinking water was the top priority. For all respondents, it was natural environment. But again, the top 3 were shared. There's also quite a drop between preserving agriculture as the 4th priority and parks and recreation. So these top 4 were really significant for, they were the most frequently chosen as top results for people who participated in this question. What do you like best about the Delta region? The top 5 priorities are, again, the same for DAC, SDAC, and all respondents. Here I just focus on the DAC and the all respondents. And you can see here that there's the top 5 were beautiful rural landscape, quality of the natural environment, slower lifestyle and small town feel, access to outdoor activities, and history and culture of the area. For all respondents, we actually had a shift in order, and that was access to outdoor activities was the 3rd over slower lifestyle and small town feel. That may be because many people who participated were coming from other parts of the state, or they were visiting the Delta. But of course, we don't know that for sure. And you can also see that diverse cultures, local jobs, and access to affordable quality housing were selected less often than for Delta region DAC respondents. Yeah, so next slide, thank you. Another question was, what, if any, concerns do you currently have about living or working in the Delta? And the top 5 priorities here were drinking water quality, levee maintenance and flooding, quality of the natural environment, and then from there it drops down to quality of roads and traffic. You can see when you go over to SDAC that traffic is slightly higher than quality of roads, so there's a difference in order there. And then you can also see when you go down to all respondents in the right-hand corner that levee maintenance and flooding and quality of the natural environment were higher than drinking water quality. But again, the top 3 concerns were shared here. Yeah, so I think, thank you, next slide. So the next slide is, do you spend much time visiting the Delta waterways and natural areas? And this was actually a question because we wondered if Delta Region DAC participants who might be historically burdened or have lower income, if they were actually in the waterways as often as kind of the, the community who had more income or were otherwise, had just different privileges. So we found that 70% of Delta Region DAC respondents do spend at least once per month in the waterways and natural areas. It's a little bit less for SDAC, but certainly that also matches up with all respondents. So that was really great to confirm. What activities do you do most frequently in the Delta? And the top 2 priorities, actually, I'd point out for Delta Region DAC respondents are hiking, walking, or running, and water activities. And this one was interesting because it changed quite a bit between SDAC and all respondents and DAC respondents. So severely disadvantaged community respondents, they by far chose hiking, walking, or running, and then water activities and just hanging out were still in their top 3 priorities, but there was quite a gap, a significant gap between that and those 2 activities. And certainly birding, hunting, or wildlife viewing, you'd consider those fairly close to as the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th priority. That's also different from all respondents, where all water activities was the highest priority, and then birding, hunting, or wildlife viewing was the 3rd priority, which was certainly different from what we saw from the Delta Region DAC and SDAC respondents. One of the questions was a map where you could drag markers, and there was a range of things you could ask. You could drag markers and share some additional information or comments on, including outdoor activities, fishing spots, historic and cultural sites, gathering places, businesses and services, and then other special places. Outdoor activities was definitely by far the most marked spot. When people were answering questions about a special place in the Delta, it was around outdoor activities, so 28%. Was what people were referring to. Fishing spots was the next, and then historic and cultural sites was after that. So certainly that concern about outdoor activities we saw continue throughout the survey. Some highlights from the special places mapping. There were many comments about the places that people identified. So starting from the left, we talked about how the most frequently selected outdoor activity were water activities, actually. So sorry, let me just restate that. So the most frequently selected outdoor activity were water activities. Combined marinas and restaurants are popular. People really talked about that, and it seemed to be a part of the quality of life in the Delta. 96% of Delta DAC respondents ID'd historic and cultural sites as needing improvement. So there was a selection there that they could choose, and so that was definitely a significant identification. Lock was identified in 41% of those historic and cultural sites, and that really stood out as a place that many people identified as important and something they were proud of, and that reflected the Delta heritage and history. And maybe I'll just point out there's a couple of different comments there, but there were many comments about lock as well. Finally, 90% of those who answered this question, they said that they eat fish 4 or more times per week. So there was a question about how often do you eat fish if you catch it, and 90% said that they eat fish 4 or more times. That was also a remarkable finding in here. Another question was, are there services that are needed in your community? And we confirmed that yes, social services are needed in the Delta. This was a question that was asking for a comment in response. And so 55% of Delta Region DAC comments stated that yes, social services were needed. Sometimes they said just plain old yes. Sometimes they said homeless services are needed, or a food bank is needed, things like that. The top services that they identified in those comments were homeless services, food banks, and food security. And then there definitely were other issues. You can see there's a whole range of issues in this word cloud. The top ones that came beyond those top 2 were affordable and quality housing, children's and teens programs, and health and medical services. The other sentiment that was expressed was no services are needed, and the comments there seem to state that it was either we have enough services, we're content with it, we take care of each other. So those were the kinds of things that you heard in that in those comments. And you can see here this comment speaks to homelessness and the various challenges, and that potentially there's possibility for jobs to help with some relief, but wouldn't solve the problem. What potential benefits of the proposal could you see for your community? More than 2/3 of Delta Region DAC respondents commented that there are no benefits that will come from the project. Other responses included there might be jobs and training, there might be improvements to the natural environment that could come from the project, including clean drinking water or access to the natural environment. I think it's important to note, however, that at the time of the survey, the community benefits program hadn't even been formulated. It was, we did not create or deliver the survey with that in mind at all. So, so when people said there's no benefits, there also wasn't anything for them to react to in terms of what benefits might be. And I would say that's also chapter 1 of the story. So we'll talk more about that with community benefits in a few minutes. Some big takeaways, and this is a 100-page plus report that's coming out. So it feels funny actually to boil it down to these 3 takeaways, and we'll talk more about, depending on what you're interested in. But Delta DAC participants have strong interest in the natural environment and preserving the Delta and its community agriculture and heritage. They see that as very tied together. And for many, they spoke to how their quality of life is interwoven with life on the water. Outdoor activities are important to Delta DAC participants, including hiking, walking, running, and other water activities. And services are needed, especially around homelessness. There's, real strong concerns that came up throughout the survey around homelessness and other forms of trash and pollution that had to do with boaters, et cetera. But I think that homelessness was certainly a big theme. All right, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Genevieve. And again, this is a report that will be forthcoming. This is kind of an early peek, which is one of the benefits that comes with being on the SEC is that you get to kind of have some of this information ahead of time. A committee member, Barbara Bergen-Perea, has her hand up. Barbara?
How are you today?
Hi, Barbara.
Question for you. What percentage of the DAC and SDAC participants came from the urban versus rural Delta? And can you talk a little bit about their differences in their response to the questions?
Yeah, I can't speak to that. That wasn't an analysis that we did. I think it's a really interesting analysis. And there's certainly, there's I mean, there's 2,000 responses, and many of them are GIS. So, you know, questions like rural and urban, questions like legacy communities, and you know, those who are not inside of it. It's hard. The other challenge that we have is that people identified themselves by zip code, and so our ability to identify participant by participant is really limited to A, whether they put that in, or B, if how tightly tied the zip code is to the community that we're thinking about, or communities that we're thinking about specifically. So there's some kind of questions around that.
Are you going to show the data by zip code in the report?
No, but that's an interesting thought. We do show a range of maps, and the maps really, I mean, those are the places that people put drop-down markers. So there is that piece. But what's your thought there, Barbara? What are you thinking about?
I'm not so worried about the drop-down markers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in knowing where the DAC and the SDAC people came from.
Mm-hmm.
So zip code data would be really important, because I think it would give us a better understanding of how and who is using the Delta by even participating in the survey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. It's a great question. So thank you. I will note that and see what we can do around that. I can't say one way or another, because it's kind of like a change in scope for what we've been doing, but I think it's a really interesting question. So, and I'm curious if you have other questions that you're like, ooh, I wonder if there was something that we learned about that.
The reason why is I kind of want to be able to match it up with what some of the answers are.
Mm-hmm.
If we could better target who is actually fishing for that much sustenance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where is that water recreation really coming from? And as much as zip code, I understand you had about 200 responses in Chinese, but there were only 2 in Spanish.
Yeah, 311 in Chinese and 12 in Spanish.
Yeah, and that makes me a little, I don't think there's any problem with how you conducted it, but it feels to me then there's like a gap in who it got to or who responded. And you and I know that when you're working with EJ communities, if you have a community, it's just like getting vaccinations done. If you have a community that isn't responding,
Mm-hmm.
it's because you're not reaching them the right way or fully, or you're missing something, or there's a trust gap.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of, I'm interested in where they came from, and I'm kind of interested in the source even within those communities.
Yeah, I think it's such a great question and comment. So one thing to know, and I do have a slide that speaks to outreach. Maybe I should go ahead and just share how we approached outreach, and then I can share some of the other things that we learned. So I think I'm not certain who's running the slideshow, but there was a slide that's after this takeaways. It was hidden.
Yeah, Genevieve, actually that slide is no longer, when I click next, it jumps to community benefits.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay. All right. Well, let me just give you an overview then. So in fact, I'm going to get my notes up. All right. So we had 4 goals for approaches to outreach. One was increase overall visibility and survey participation. That was kind of using some of the traditional methods and Facebook and e-blasts and things like that. And Barbara, I know that your e-blast really helped with that. So just want to say thank you for that. And we did a couple of things. One is we were inclusive with how we approached the survey. We made the survey short, interactive, and engaging, and we created a solid foundation for web-based action. So the Facebook posts and other methods. The next one was to increase participation by disadvantaged community members who live or work in the Delta. And we worked with about 40 different community organizations in various ways to get the word out. And that was both to limited English speakers as well as low income, et cetera. And I would say, I mean, we actually called about 400 community organizations, and so we got about 10% to take action.
Okay.
And some of the context to remember is that it was right during both the census, which was really important, a huge
Right.
outreach lift for local organizations and those constituents. And then also the elections were happening, which just added to the noise. And also there was a lot of things that people were deeply concerned about. So we were competing with that. And then there's Thanksgiving was also part of it. But in that, for the disadvantaged community members, we also tested outreach with Univision. We worked with Sacramento Cultural Hub. We did radio spots and videos. We did radio spots in Spanish. So we used some of the more traditional Spanish language media channels, which was, I wouldn't say they were good, but they weren't as successful as they could have been. And there are some things that I would change if we were to do that again.
You in the San Joaquin County end?
No, because we were really focusing on the Delta region. Wait, you said the San Joaquin County what?
County end of the Delta, yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, of the Delta, yeah, for sure, yeah. And then we also did direct outreach, including bag stuffing at food banks. We showed up to school meals and, long lines of cars for during COVID-19. That was actually a really interesting opportunity because we got to talk to people as they were driving up and hand them flyers with the survey. And then, post offices, we did some of the more kind of posting things at other spots. But COVID-19 was definitely, it both helped and hindered our efforts, I would say. And then the last piece that I think is important is also we were targeting non-English speakers via the translated surveys. And so we had everything translated. We had the Spanish speaking language media. But for the Chinese community, Doug really tapped into his networks and got the word out. And I think it must have gone viral or something because we had over 300 responses with that work. And it just showed me the power of someone who's really respected and embedded in the local community and in that particular limited English speaking community and how that can work. And I would say that would be my big lesson learned. I know, Gia, I haven't actually met you personally, although I think Ag Innovations has, but working, to get the word out around things like this might be something that we could collaborate on in the future. And certainly this was last fall. So, that would be a lesson learned for the future and also just something to acknowledge the power of local community leaders when they put their personal networks to use.
So Genevieve, I'm just going to note that we have a few more questions and we do have kind of a limit on time. We're
absolutely sorry. Yes.
5 minutes. So committee member Michael Moran.
Hey Genevieve, this was great stuff. Thank you so much. A couple questions. The questions are going to be in the report. The survey questions will be in the report.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because that one about the 90% of four meals or more of fish per week was my socks off. And that was definitely worded in such a way, fish that you caught from the Delta.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. And then I'm just going to reiterate what Barbara said about it would really be priceless to have as much zip code data as we could.
Mm-hmm.
Or otherwise. That'd be great. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. And I'm just going to confirm that. I believe that the question was mentioned that way. Certainly the whole context was about in the Delta. Yes, because the question was about fishing spots in the Delta. So yes.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Genevieve. Thanks, Mike. Okay. Douglas Shea.
Hi, Genevieve. Hi. Okay, I'm not questioning you. I just want to learn. Okay, household income below $75,000 is considered disadvantaged. I thought if someone making $70,000, it's not a bad income.
Yeah, it was such that whole conversation. We have an appendix devoted to it about why we made the decisions that we did there. But the short of it is that. Actually, let me get the slide in front of me so I'm speaking accurately.
And while you're looking for that, I'm just going to elevate Isabella Gonzalez Potter's comment that although DAC can be a confusing acronym in the environmental world, it is also used to mean direct air capture. So we all have our cultural elements related to our acronyms related to our industries. So there you go.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I was coached to use disadvantaged communities as much as I could because DAC is one of those, it's another acronym, but it's hard to resist. So Doug, back to your question. It's by zip code and household income is less than 75,000. And the reason we did that is because Cal EnviroScreen has done a really important job of mapping zip codes with other kinds of concerns like pollution. There was maybe 20 different indicators. And so if you live in a zip code that has been considered to be disadvantaged by Cal EnviroScreen, we said, we actually had thought, well, maybe we'll just include them because you're in this and you're in this this zip code identified as being burdened. However, when we looked at that, we had the same thing. Well, at least we want to say a cap of 75,000, partly to differentiate it from SDAC, which also had an income cap, and also because it seemed to be a reasonable cap within the zip code. Otherwise, it could have been someone living in the zip code and their income could have been 90,000 or 100,000 or 200,000. So we had to have some kind of reasonable way of defining an income cap. And you should read when it comes out. I'll point you to the appendix that serves that if you're interested.
Okay, we're good. Thank you so much. Gil Cosio, that's our last question.
Yeah, that was a great report. What really jumped out at me was the number of people or the ranking of the levee maintenance as being important to people.
Mm-hmm.
I recall a few years ago, I was on Bolden Island with somebody from Department of Water Resources that should have known, and he had this epiphany, and he looked at the water and said, "It looks like the water's higher than the land." And I said, yeah, like 10 to 20 feet higher, depending on where you are. So it's nice that the locals really understand that that's a big thing. So the question I have, and it may not be for you, Genevieve, but I think for the whole group and especially the DWR EIR people, is that, we're going to have a secondary or tertiary impact of the tunnels. And that's a drop in the funding for levee maintenance. And so there's no process now to really look at that impact, but it's very well documented over history that levees have always been an issue from the 50s before the State Water Project was even funded. And every time it comes up, either they don't get funded like they didn't for a number of years until Brandon Andrus broke in 1972, or they just get avoided saying, well, the earthquake's going to take them down, so we're building tunnels. So it's going to be interesting how it gets messaged, if it gets messaged, that at some point, the levees could suffer because the tunnels may lessen the desire of the state to maintain them. So just a comment, but I thought it was interesting that the locals recognize off the bat that, yeah, we got to keep these levees out.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much for that.
Thanks, Gil, and thank you so much, Genevieve. Mike has one more comment, Mike Moran.
Just a real quick one. Thanks so much for accommodating me. The Conservancy and other folks have had a lot of outreach regarding mercury and safe fishing and things like that. So if there's a way that you could interface with these numbers, again, that 4 meals per week is really astounding. So that's a cause for just enlightenment, but also a great concern. Mm-hmm. So if we can make that data available to those folks as soon as possible, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great note.
Yeah, especially to start to consider the toxic algae and stuff which are showing up in the Delta.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are we ready to move to the next one?
We are.
Okay, so 5D. SEC members have previously raised the community benefits framework as a topic you wanted to be part of. As a point of fact, the Community Benefits Program and developing its framework is a DWR process. But in the same way, SEC input has influenced the timing and urgent need for this process, and today's discussion has become an opportunity. As some of the most informed people on this conveyance project, because of your commitment and dedication to more than a year's worth of meetings and research, today the SEC will be functioning as a key stakeholder group in providing input and feedback on the Community Benefits Program or framework, sorry. And as we have consistently said, this exercise in no way indicates your support for the project, nor will it be captured as such in the environmental document. So basically, Genevieve Taylor, I believe, will be providing an update on this and walking the SE3 members through the framework development program. So Genevieve, you're back on.
Great.
Just for clarification, one more time, I'm going to do a little time check. It is 5:05. You have we've allocated about 20 minutes for this discussion.
Okay.
Questions, Valerie?
I'm sorry?
Does that include the question time?
Oh, total, yes.
Total,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I will walk quickly. And usually Juliana Burkhoff would she is our facilitator of community benefits. I've been really so glad that she came to Ag Innovations and was able to support this process. And she was unexpectedly unable to make it today. So I'm the sub for this one. All right, so Community Benefits Program, and we can just go to the next slide. In this, we'll be talking about the ideas from the community benefits interviews, and then also providing an opportunity for input on the community benefits program and project ideas. And you'll notice that we've translated them. This is a result of our community benefits workshop, which we are fully translating in Spanish, and we hope to be continuing that in the future as well. We know that it's an important thing for community outreach. All right, so here's the overview. Juliana and a community benefits outreach team conducted 44 interviews between February to middle of March, 3/19 this year. And one of the questions was, what are your thoughts on this community benefits program? And the majority supported the concept of a community benefits program. And I would say that that's the bookend to that piece, that question that we asked in the survey of a community benefit, of what benefits do you see of the proposed project. So it's interesting to see that the majority here support the concept of a community benefits program if the project goes through. Concerns included complexity and feasibility. Don't make it too complex. What's the feasibility of a program? Trust, the need for oversight and enforceable commitments. A lack of in-delta capacity, and that was important in terms of the design of a community benefits program and how it might roll out. A question about will projects last throughout construction and after construction, and a desire for more CEQA information first to do the impacts assessment, and then to also to talk from that place about mitigation. Recommendations from the summary included funding existing programs and avoiding competing with existing programs. So focus on what's there first in terms of other organizations or capacity. Use existing community action plans and other Delta project plans. Fund savings accounts for residents to use for education and job training. Provide lump sums for legacy communities. Ensure planning and oversight are locally driven, and solicit broad input about different types of projects to consider. So that's the summary, very high level, and I'm sure Juliana could add more depth, but what we really want to know right now is, what do you think about the community benefits concept? What should the program's purpose and objectives be? So this, there is a concept paper that's on the website But I don't even, you can look at that, but it's also just about backing up, like what should the program's purpose and objectives be, given what you know from your own experience about the Delta. What's your reaction to the proposed program components? And, what do you think about the proposed categories of benefits? And then do you have any project suggestions? And that one we'd love to get your thoughts on as well. And if you have any questions, I might be tapping into Janet or Carrie to also fill in any gaps, but we'll try to answer those questions too. So actually, let's stay on that slide with the questions. If you could go back one. All right, so I'd love to open it up now to any SEC member who'd like to respond to any of these different questions. We really sincerely want your input, and there are workshops that have been happening. We hope and would really appreciate you participating in that, but we thought coming here was very important for to get your sense of these questions.
Could I just put one point? If you want to, think about some of these questions too, and then put it into an email, that would also be good if you don't want to just address it right now. So, Valerie, who do you think that they should address these emails to if they have questions on this one?
Genevieve, I think, or Juliana will have her contact information at the end, correct?
Yes.
And so that email address will be there. And so that would be a great place for people to send their thoughts.
Okay.
This is Janet. Can I provide you with the email address?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we have a couple of things. One is there is a specific email address just for community benefits related input, and that is Delta Conveyance CBP at water.ca.gov. And then also on our website, there is a community benefits program section of the website, and there's a form in there. If you wanted to just use the form and type your comments into there, that might be an easy way to do it as well. Thank you.
Jenny, can you repeat that one more time, please? Delta.
Yep. Delta Conveyance, C as in Charlie, B as in boy, P as in Palmer, at water.ca.gov.
Water.ca.
And obviously CBP stands for Community Benefits Program.
Yes, ma'am.
I just stuck it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Look at you go. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Genevieve, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is a good moment just to open it up. And if you'd like to raise your hand, I know Valerie will help you get in the queue.
Yeah, no hands are up. And again, I know that a lot of folks have already been interviewed and are participating in other levels. So this may end up being a little more informational than not. We have committee member Anna Swenson who has her hand up.
Great.
I just like to thank Genevieve, because this is the one of the first times I've seen something translated side by side for community input, and I think that this is great. I don't personally support the community benefits program because the Delta is not for sale, and no one here feels like there is any amount of money that you could drag through the Delta that would make us sell out our neighbors or give up our land or give up multi-generational farmland or community or schools or any of the things that we have out here in this agrarian wonderland, literally. There's no amount of money that you could pay a farmer to stop farming and set aside his practices for 12 years and then try to come back to it after you have applied muck to his land and then covered it up with topsoil. So while I really appreciate the efforts, under no circumstances do I think that there is any amount of money, especially with the history of DWR, with community benefit programs, not following through. I mean, this is all great, and you can present this to us and say this is what we potentially could get. But history, just like the lack of maintenance on Oroville Dam causes me pause, the same pause happens when you look into DWR's history of not completing community benefit programs. And it was the same dog and pony show then. They came through and they said, we we'll do this, we will do that for your community. And when it came back out, it's a small community pathway to nowhere. So until I actually see something concrete that would actually show that there's a change, I'm not in support of the community benefit program.
Totally respect that. Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for your comment. And what I know everyone has different thoughts. I'm sure that we don't want to stifle anyone from being able to provide any sort of participation or input. So absolutely hear you, absolutely respect it, but we also want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for those who do want to participate. And again, at no point is anyone seeing any sort of participation as a support for the project. That is absolutely a non-starter. Committee member Karen Mann.
I absolutely thank you for allowing me to say something. And I agree with Anna as far as the presentation is very nice. I totally agree as well that the Delta is not for sale. The Delta fish are not for sale. Delta water is not for sale. The water belongs to the entire state, not just to a group of people somewhere south that want this water. So I concur that that this program, I'm glad to see that 400 people responded, but I think you should also compare that to the number of residents in the Delta community from the town of Stockton and all the towns surrounding the Delta waterways affected by this. And if the ratio, I mean, you can't use a sampling of 400 people to determine what benefits you're thinking of offering. But more than that, the Delta is not for sale. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. And again, go ahead, Genevieve.
Sorry, just one correction. We've done 44 interviews, so it certainly doesn't hit that. And I think, we're really hoping that this is a draft that will get more input. So just wanted to make sure you understood that, Karen. And again, I really understand where both you and Anna are coming from around this. And note that I think what I'm taking away as well is that there's a need to make sure that if community benefits are identified, that that as a part of, and I'm hearing that may be a challenge, that you don't want that, but it needs to reflect the whole of the Delta and the residents that are there. So I am taking that away.
Thank you, Genevieve. I appreciate that. And I misheard. I thought it was 400. 44,
that would be great.
44. 44 people don't speak for the entire Delta. So
absolutely.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Just for clarification, again, perhaps it might be beneficial to have either Carrie or Janet or Genevieve speak to what the community benefits program is, because it certainly sounds unseemly when folks are saying that somehow the Delta is trying to be bought. And I don't know that that's the intent, but that may be the way it feels. Mm-hmm. And so can we get some clarification on what the intent is in order to perhaps clarify? And then we can go to our folks are lining up to make some comments. So Carrie and Janet.
Yeah, this is Janet. I can do that really quickly if you think it would be helpful, Val.
Sure.
There's a couple of things that were in the PowerPoint presentation from the first workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago. So that might be a helpful thing for folks to take a look at. That's available on the website. And the summary from that will be available before the next meeting as well. But I'll just read from that because that might be helpful. One is the concept, which is a defined set of commitments made by project proponents and created in coordination with the local community to create lasting, tangible, and potentially significant economic and social benefit to the residents, businesses, and organizations facing project impacts. And I guess the only other thing I would add is that there were some acknowledgments that we made in that presentation as well, sort of answering the question, why create a community benefits program? And these might be helpful too. So I'll just very quickly read them. Acknowledge that the direct project benefits, e.g. state water project reliability, are not located inside the Delta. Acknowledge that if the project is approved, it could have potential adverse effects that Delta communities may endure through construction. And thirdly, acknowledge the limitations of traditional CEQA environmental mitigation typically affords. So I'll just stop there. I know there's probably some other commentary and questions, but if you want more information, that PowerPoint is on the website.
Awesome. Okay. And so, and I will continue to reiterate that participation in this discussion does not indicate support for the project. Instead, it continues the potential for finding space where leveraging the development of this project might create opportunities to address some needs. So, Gia Moreno, committee member Gia, you have your hand up.
Okay, I was just looking at this and I wasn't able to attend the workshop, but is there something within this that's going to cover like crop loss or job loss for people when they have to be, you know, like on hold for the 12 years that this is going to be under construction?
So, you know what, Janet, I think you should probably speak to this because it seems like we're heading into mitigation territory with that question. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, I was going to jump in if that's
great,
okay.
Great. Go for it.
Yeah, so Gia, we are going to be looking at those things as part of the environmental document. So we will be assessing the potential for a change in agricultural land use, and we will identify if and how some ideas for mitigation. I will say agricultural mitigation within the Delta is pretty limited, and so I'm not sure that we will be able to come up with things that fully are able to mitigate impacts, but we're going to do our best as part of the environmental document to look at that. So to some extent, those are things that we are already considering. That said, if you have ideas of things that might be beneficial for agricultural communities, those are absolutely things that we would love to hear in this meeting.
And I think, Gia, one other thing is that it doesn't, the benefits don't have to be tied to a mitigation. So it's like they can just, the one way to think about this is what would really be of benefit to the Delta? What, you know, so in this case, we were talking about agricultural communities. So I might turn the question back to you is, what do you think would be really beneficial to the agricultural communities in general?
I mean, the biggest benefit is to not have this project go through. But another thing was back, I don't know, maybe two meetings ago, when it was first presented, and then there was other examples of like a golf course in New York that was that had a water treatment facility underneath it and some wind turbines in the ocean and LAX. And I had specifically asked, like, oh, is there something that we could build, you know, an example from? Like, is there a project of this size in another rural community, so we can get an idea of how community benefits funds worked in those situations? And I haven't seen anything. And then for us to keep going back and saying, these are the things that, you know, that would help, or, you know, that there's nothing that can help. We're a very specific community, and to be told like, oh, well, you know, here's a electric bus, like, it's difficult.
Yeah, thank you, Gia.
All right, a couple things.
I have my hand up.
We have a few people,
Okay.
but not before we go there. There are a couple of folks who are going into the chat, and I was just remembering that Jennifer, you may need to clarify it. The chat can only be seen by panelists. Is that correct? Because it says to all panelists, yes. That means that the attendees can't see. So I'm going to note that. But one of the questions that came in was, which website can we see past workshops? And Genevieve or Janet, can you answer that?
Yeah, DWR has a community benefits program and everything's being posted on there. So it's one of the web pages for DWR, and we can certainly distribute that. Perfect, thank you. And maybe by the end of this discussion, we can provide that URL, that website. So Cece, Giacomo. Committee member Cece.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Yes, ma'am.
Hopefully I'll keep my signal. It's been very sketchy today.
Okay.
You're talking about community benefits, and I want to salute Genevieve Taylor for actually polling residents of the Delta. It's very refreshing to hear what they have to say, and I think it's very noteworthy that the two top things to them are water quality and levees. Clearly, they're afraid for their places. So I think that at the top of community benefits would be ensuring that they have water quality and that the levees are protected. And so far, I've asked a few times for a map of the aquifers and pointed out that all of the residents and the agricultural, the farmers, all depend on wells. And yet there is no effort made to track those aquifers and what will happen to them when the drilling starts and land is being redistributed. So I think if you're going to address community benefits, you need to look at community necessities as seen at the top of that list.
Yeah, in the EJ survey, there were several mentions of groundwater. It's good to have you elevate that. So, and talk about, it seems like access to clean drinking water and kind of the relationship with groundwater was a theme. It wasn't a large theme, but it certainly showed up. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Terrific.
There's not even a seismic.
Oh, you're breaking up, CC, a little bit.
The most recent one.
There you go. Oh.
Part of that would also. Oh well, I don't think I can.
We can see. We can hear you now. Do you want to turn off your video and maybe we can hear you a little easier? CC.
I was saying. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes. Now we can hear you a little better. Go ahead.
I was also adding in that there is not even a current seismic study which addresses levee safety as well, and groundwater. It all ties together, and the paramount concerns of the people is protecting their water, and these things are all part of that.
Is there, Cece, is there a specific area that really has the connection between groundwater and levees that you're identifying, or is it throughout the Delta?
Throughout the Delta, it's a very dynamic place.
Yeah.
It depends on the integrity of the ground and the water source. And when you start talking about drilling a massive tunnel to divert the river, it's huge. It's terrifying. It's terrifying to the people who live here. And that just seems to be skated over. Those questions are not addressed. And they are very, very important. They are more important than anything else, in fact, in my opinion. And in the opinion of the people that I have spoken to, and I've spoken to a lot of people.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks, Cece. So let's go to SCC member Jim Cox. Jim?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, you know, in terms of the community benefits program, I've been going out and speaking with a lot of people in the fishing community. And the basic feeling is that this is something that nobody trusts, that the fishing community has had promises made to us over the last 25, 30 years that have never been followed up on. And a lot of the people feel that this is just the same thing again, and that the fishing community is being left out of discussions on water projects. And we have a lot of input, but we're always told, oh, we can't talk about that now. But I will say that of the people that I have spoken with, there is one issue that comes up quite a bit for a community benefit, which I intend to present at the next workshop. But, you know, and we are pretty much united on this is a benefit that would help. But there's still a lot of distrust in the fishing community with any sort of benefit program.
Mm-hmm.
And from a framework standpoint, Jim, that's really actually helpful because it speaks to, and Genevieve, you can speak to this, perhaps how we end up going out and gathering the information, or how you end up going out and gathering the information about benefits, correct? About what that information is, correct?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about the framework, right? We're not actually looking at the specific benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important both to note the trust that needs to be built and for people to want to contribute, but also that phishing has there's some sincere ideas. And Jim, I mean, if you wanted to send that beforehand or give us a heads up about that, that would be excellent. We'd love to hear that. And it's just good to know even that you're formulating some ideas right now around that.
Okay.
I think there's a common theme here on trust overall.
Yeah.
And I think we need to keep that in mind.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Committee member Barbara Berrigan-Perea.
Thank you. A couple comments. I think there's sometimes a mistaken belief maybe in the community, maybe with some of community's members here, that a community benefits program is in lieu of mitigation, and it's not. Mitigation is what has to be done legally to minimize impacts, whether it can be accomplished or not. I think, I've already heard Carrie say today, if everything can be mitigated, is our cold, hard reality. A community benefits program is where you try to use imagination. And if you are living in a new universe, what would protect your people or your community? It is certainly not buying into a project. I just want to say to committee members, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater on this one. We will fight forever about the tunnel, but we learned a very important lesson for environmental justice communities around AB 32. When AB 32 was created, it did not take into account what kind of mitigation measures were needed for air pollution. And environmental justice communities, because they opposed cap and trade, were not at the table. And then afterwards, they were living with the pollution that is actually created by green activities. So AB 617 was created. Having just lived through a year and a half of the AB 617 process as an attempt at remediation for what wasn't done for environmental justice communities during AB 32, it's not something I would ever want to live through again. I don't think we hit the goals that we needed to hit. I do not think it built community. And boy, you want to talk about distrust. There are reasons to be distrustful, and I'm constantly kind of railing about what is really going on with water quality planning and size, and the big issues are on the table. But the second part of this is this goes hand in hand with the EJ survey. There's a small percentage of people in California who really understand water. We've spent 15 years trying to broaden that network, and we've succeeded given what we've had for resources to get the job done. But think about it, we haven't succeeded. 2/3 of the DAC and SDAC folks have not participated in any water planning meeting or any water governance meeting. So for some people, this is their entrance point. This is their way into expressing how they see things. And ironically, as a community leader who works on this stuff, I do not feel I can always speak for other people. I think if you're really going to do things in a small d democratic sort of way, you've got to give people space to represent themselves. So, we've made it clear to people we think they should participate in the process. I will be the last person to fill it out because I don't want to influence people's thinking. But, I just want to say, you get up and you fight your fight every day. You plan for you hope and work towards the best, but you always make sure that you have your back end covered. because people's lives are at stake. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, committee member Gil Cosio.
Thanks, Valerie. I might have missed it in the presentation, but how was the turnout to the first workshop? And the reason I'm asking, it kind of surprised me when the notice came out. It was like the day you had to register. And I know you could have emailed and gotten in a little later, but I couldn't even fit in my schedule, so I didn't register for the first one. I got comments from other constituents that they felt the same way, just kind of got sprung on them.
Interesting.
I noticed today, notice came out saying the May 6th workshop next week, the deadline's been extended to register. So how do you anticipate the participation to be? How was it for the first workshop, and what do you think about the subsequent workshops?
Yeah, I mean, the workshop was, well, Janet knows probably more details about this, but it was noticed at least a month before the first one. And then I think a couple of other messages came through. So maybe it's just not being tracked. Janet, do you want to speak to this particular?
Yeah. So that's right. So we had a couple of notices that went out. We did postcards. We did postings at the post offices. We reached out to a couple of press folks. Like we tried to, hit the publicity measures in a couple of different ways. We did on this one, we did want to extend the registration window, and anybody who wants to participate can. It's helpful for us to know how many people are registered, just so that we can make sure we have enough facilitators and that kind of thing. The first workshop, I think we probably had about, I don't know, something like, don't quote me on this, but it was something like 125 people registered. And I think we ended up with something along the lines of, again, don't quote me on it, but I think it was somewhere between maybe around 35 people actually participating. So there were a lot of people that signed up, but then they dropped off at the last minute. And it's hard to really say why that is. The last time I checked for next week's workshop, I checked yesterday, and I think we were at around 115 registered, which is great. I'm just hoping that people will be able to actually carve out the time and show up. So, let me know if you have any other questions about that.
Okay, thanks.
And Gilbert, if you have any additional thoughts on how to get the word out, we'd be totally open to it. I will say that we've been doing a lot, but we haven't used all of the different methods that we used last year for the survey as well. Like it just hasn't received quite the same amount of outreach. And yet we're hoping that we can still bring people into it. The next meeting we have will be in breakout groups as well. So there'll be some more time for dialogue, and it'll be a great opportunity for more depth to come from those who can participate.
Okay.
Valerie, how are we doing on our time?
We kind of need
We're way over, huh?
Yeah, but we do need to move on. Anna does have her hand up, and we are crunched for time. Anna, do you want to close this discussion?
I really quickly, I was signed up for that workshop, and COVID does weird things, not the disease, but the circumstance does weird things to people. And extra reminders I have found are very helpful. We kind of need to help each other. And so a reminder the morning of is like a gem that I just cherish for something that I've signed up for and I want to participate, and then it kind of slips from my mind, and that reminder for the day of is something that is very helpful. So
Great.
just a suggestion.
That's great. Thank you, Anna.
And thanks to my fellow board member or committee member, sorry, not board member, committee member Lindsay for reminding me about the workshop. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we are moving on. Thank you, Genevieve. That was awesome. Oh, and here's the
sorry, let me address. Yeah, I know you're trying to, but could you go back one slide? There's just two things that I should say. The next workshop is May 6th, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We'd love to have you. It's really ideas for project types, and it's a very practical conversation. We have another workshop on May 25th, and then we'll be including this framework as part of the EIR. And I just want to, Ag Innovations has done a lot of work on this, and I do want to say that the partnership that we have with DWR and their willingness to listen to the input that we bring has been a really important part of this process. So thank you for the well wishes, all of you. I really appreciated it. And I just want to make sure that, this is part of what DWR is doing. And I think that's important for being able to speak to things like trust as we go forward. So thanks, Valerie.
Thanks, Genevieve. All right, Sarah.
Yeah, so now we do have public comment agendized, and so this is the non-SEC members who are not panelists who might have some public comment. So do we have any public comment on this? I'm sure we must.
We do. We have OSHA Meserve, who wants to speak on any of the items from item number 5. OSHA, are you there?
Yes, hello?
Perfect, we hear you perfectly, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to give OSHA Meserve, local agencies of the North Delta. I think I would like to comment on the public benefits aspect. I did listen to that first meeting, and I think it was run very professionally, but I made a comment at the DCA meeting, and I think I want to make the same comment here because Genevieve is here, and maybe it could impact how you run the next one. But I think that having the participants masked from each other really detracted from the ability of people to feel like they were interacting. And, I think it was unfortunate that it was kind of set up as a one-way mirror where it's like the people running the meeting could see everybody and everything, but the people participating in the meeting saw nothing. And, you couldn't see other comments, couldn't see other faces, couldn't see how many people were there, who they were. I completely understand needing to control time and making sure there's not Zoom bombing and, things like that in order to have a productive meeting. But I think that for the future meetings, I hope that the format could be adjusted a bit to be a bit more open for the people participating, because I think otherwise it was so restrictive as to kind of take away from, if DWR really wants to hear from the public about its opinions and ideas, I think, having that much masking really detracted from that. So that's just a suggestion for future meetings. And then, it got brought up by Carrie, and I think it's appropriate, a big problem with people trying to imagine about a community benefit package and trying to, provide input on it really is on this issue of not knowing what the mitigation measures will be proposed. And so I wonder if, I know that DWR wants to go forward with the community benefit discussion now. I think it will need to be reopened again after, draft EIR, and there's some kind of idea of what the mitigation measures are, so that the public could understand what this additional bucket of, things may be. And I will say, having participated in the, prior iterations of the tunnel project, that, there was a lot of disagreement about whether the mitigation measures were adequate at all. So, and that never got resolved. So, it's hard for me to imagine that, the community is going to be super impressed with the mitigation measure and design such that, they'll feel that, for instance, water quality or agriculture, or these things are like mitigated to the point that you wouldn't want to put some of those things into the community benefit bucket. So it's just one of the kind of challenges of the setup.
Thanks, OSHA. Appreciate it. Thank you for your comment. I think, Genevieve, you did mention that are going to be some adjustments, and it is going to be a little more interactive. I think, I don't think OSHA was alone in that feeling.
Yeah, it will be having small group facilitators, and it'll be in a meeting setting. So absolutely.
Sure.
Breakout rooms are really useful for that.
Well, and I think it's terrific that OSHA participated. And again, this continues to be an ongoing discussion where we're encouraging everyone to participate because you want to be able to have that seat at the table. The other thing I want to note before we move on, just really quickly, Genevieve, the website address for the Community Benefits Program is, okay, it's a standard state website address. So hold on to your socks here. water.ca.gov/programs/state-water-project.
Hey, Val. Hey,
Yeah.
Val. I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you and just make this a lot easier?
That'd be great.
Water.ca.gov/Delta Conveyance. And from that page, there's a button on the right that says Community Benefits.
Yep.
There you go.
And I put the web page on the chat for those who can access the chat.
Right. But for attendees who are not part of the panelists, that's why we wanted to make sure that they had it.
If you just Google DWR Delta Conveyance, you'll get right to it. Community Benefits. It'll come right to the page.
Awesome. All right, Chair Palmer, it's all yours.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, we have no more public comment on that item 5?
Just the one.
Okay. All right. Thank you, OSHA. On item number 6, future agendas, we're going to be doing what? Community Benefits Framework and the design change updates. Anything else?
Yeah, let's open this up a little bit. And again, this can be one of those things that is emailed at another time. For the moment, our next meeting is looking like June 23rd. As a reminder, our pacing is changing a little bit. Our meeting cadence is changing a little bit. So again, where we can, we've talked about skipping a month. So our next meeting for now is slated for June 23rd. After that, we anticipate that we'll probably take the summer off from meeting because there's going to be other work going on. But from the standpoint of SEC activity, I think there's not going to be so much that would warrant a meeting. And so after that, I believe we're looking at a meeting possibly August, probably September. Is that correct?
Yes, I think we have it set up for that, don't we, Nasli?
Yeah, not August. I think in the fall.
Yeah, people have things to do over the summer, and it would be really hard to get everybody together. And yeah, but do keep aware that we will be sending out emailed information, and so that you can still feel that you're in the fold, at least in terms of information. So other than that, June 23rd at same time, same thing. We're not going to meet personally yet.
And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
And if there are other items that you want to address or identify, please do, as always, send us your thoughts, and we will go ahead and begin to integrate that into the meeting cadence.
Okay. So now let's work on item 7, non-agendized SEC questions or comments. This is the time for SEC members to provide information about outreach or questions raised related to the proposed project and any other items you feel you haven't been able to bring up during this meeting. So this is for non-agendized items. And so let's open that up for SEC members.
Okay, so this is the roundtable that we've had, consistently since the beginning of these meetings. Again, if in fact you have an item that you want to address, this is that space. If not, again, email is always a good option. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any hands.
Okay.
Okay, Joe Palmer. Mm-hmm.
Okay, then we're going to move on to item 8, which is public comment. And so this is for public comment on non-agendized items. And Ms. Martinez, have we received any non-agendized items?
No, we have not.
Okay, then item 9. Our next meeting is noted. It will be June 23rd at 3 p.m. on Ring Central. And as long as that goes, thank you folks for attending. You have very busy schedules, I know. We're actually finishing a little bit early, which is great, I think, for everyone. So go off and have a wonderful week, a wonderful couple of months, and be safe. get your vaccinations, mask up when you need to, but there's been new guidelines which loosens that up a little bit for those who have been vaccinated. So that's good news. So please, folks, thank you so much, and we are adjourned.